one student from Iran, he was saying that when I'm in a culture, sometimes I'm doing things, and according to some of my other cultures, I'm not supposed to do those things. So then it's sort of like an inner struggle going on because I'm breaking some of the rules of some of the cultures, but I'm doing the stuff that you're supposed to do in the other one. So for some people, it's hard, depending on how many rules they have and how strict they are.
You're listening to Speaking of Language, a podcast recorded at the Language Resource Center at Cornell University. I'm Dan Gable, Technology Manager for the LRC. Each week, we explore a topic related to language pedagogy and second language acquisition. This week, on Speaking of Language, where do you call home? In this episode, we speak to Alice Wu, an intercultural consultant at Cornell University. Alice is the creator of a series of films about global nomads and third culture kids, people who've spent their developmental years living in multiple countries, building relationships to many cultures while not having full ownership in any. Alice discusses the challenges and benefits of growing up this way and what people of transcultural backgrounds have to offer our increasingly interconnected world.
Well, so here we are this afternoon with Alice Wu. I'm Dick Feldman from the Language Resource Center. Alice has a varied background in language teaching and cultural workshops of various sorts, but she has a special interest in something called third culture kids. Is that right?
Yep, third culture kids and global nomads.
And global nomads. Are those the same thing or are those different things?
They're pretty similar.
I see.
One person made up one term and another person made up the other term.
All right.
People who have this kind of background have usually lived in more than one culture or country. Often they've lived in many countries and cultures, and so they feel like they have parts of the different cultures in them, but they don't feel like they are strongly affiliated with any one country or culture.
Sounds like they're kind of lost.
Some of them are. Some of them aren't. It kind of depends. A lot of them, I think almost all of them, see this as a really huge benefit, that they can gain a lot from the experience, although it does have its challenges also.
Well, how did this happen? I mean, are these people who's, I guess in the military is one way that happens?
Yes. So often they have parents who are either diplomats or missionary, military, international business, international agency, international education, international something. So their parents have jobs that cause them to move a lot, so the kids move a lot as they're growing up.
I mean, before you even get to other cultures, just moving around that much in your own culture would seem to be a challenge, and with, I suppose, some benefits.
Yes, it is. I think one thing that's really hard for kids if they have to keep moving is they have to keep leaving their friends. And then the other thing is that they don't know if they're going to be able to do the things that they signed up for, like maybe they're going to be the lead in the school play, or they're going to be the quarterback on the football team, or they're going to get to go on a trip to somewhere, and then it turns out they're moving, so then they get to not go, which is difficult.
Right.
Yeah,
right.
I think leaving friends also, especially for kids and teenagers, is really hard.
Yeah. Actually, one year I was taking my family overseas, and I had a daughter in her mid-teens, and she told us later that she contacted a lawyer to ask if she really had to go.
Wow. How old was she?
14 or something.
Yeah, that's a hard age.
Yeah, and of course he told her that, yes, she did.
That's funny.
Yeah.
Well, did she have a good time?
I think she did in the end, yes.
Yeah, good.
Yeah, she was fine. But I think it was about leaving her friends.
Yeah, it's really hard at that age, especially because your friends are everything at that age, I think.
Yeah. Do some of these kids have sets of friends in 5 different places that they've kept in touch with?
Yeah. Some people, I know one student now who grew up in Ithaca part of the time, and he still has friends that he was friends with up until about 4th or 5th grade. And now he's back again, and he's like 20, and he still is in touch with those friends. So, and then he's lived in other countries like Italy and Spain and India and other states like California and places, but he still has friends, different groups of friends in different places.
I mean, technology has made it easier to keep track of people.
Oh, yeah. It's so much better now than it used to be for global nomads and third culture kids, or just everybody, because, with Facebook and FaceTime, Google Hangout, Skype, WhatsApp, all that stuff, people can keep in really good track of their family and their friends.
You said there are advantages and disadvantages. What are some of the advantages of being a global nomad versus growing up as I did in pretty much in one place? So we took trips places, but we always came back, and there were my friends there, and I always came back to the same place and knew that one place really was home.
There's a lot of advantages. Some of them are the sort of the obvious ones. You get to go to interesting places, see different kinds of places, or have interesting experiences. Like I have pictures of one kid riding on camels in the desert, and another kid is like visiting pyramids. There's all kinds of interesting things you get to do. You learn languages. You're usually proficient in a lot of languages if you live in different places. And then your outlook is changed so that you're generally very open-minded, flexible, adaptable, non-judgmental. You can see things from the perspective of other countries and cultures. Usually know a lot about the world and other countries. You have sort of a first-hand knowledge of what another culture's like, not just, oh, they're on the news and who cares, but more you know people who live there, you know what the country's like, you know more about it in depth. So, there's, a lot of really good benefits, I guess. But, there's also challenges because, as you said, you knew where your friends and your home were.
Yeah.
And for a lot of these kids, I think that's like the main thing, that they don't really know where their home is. They don't really maybe feel they have a home in a certain place. And sometimes they feel kind of rootless in terms of where they belong, where their home is, where they should go back to, or they feel kind of in between places.
Mm-hmm.
They miss things from both cultures, or they miss people in both places, or sometimes they have issues of cultural identity in terms of not knowing exactly what their culture is, and feeling parts of many cultures but not just one culture, which some people are fine with and other people find more problematic.
So does it vary a lot? Are there some people who come out of this saying, this has just been a real problem for me growing up. I'm left confused and sad and dislocated, and I'm so jealous of people who grew up in one place? Or do some people have a generally negative stance about the whole thing?
I've only met one person like that.
I see.
I've known a lot of these kids. I seem to meet them all the time.
I see.
Not only students, but like adults who then I find out, oh yeah, I lived in Italy for 2 years. Oh yeah, I lived in Switzerland for 4 years. But people don't usually talk about it right off the bat. But almost everyone I've talked to, I've made 3 videos about students over a 20-year period. Almost all of them feel that they wouldn't want to give up their background and that they feel it's very positive in general, although they do see challenges. But a lot of them have said explicitly, I would never give it up. I'm really glad I have this background. I'm really glad I had this chance. And a lot of them end up doing work that's related to their background, or they have skills that they can use later, like they go into writing or mediation or counseling or advising, communications, journalism, all kinds of things. So they make good use of it, and they keep traveling or they keep living in other countries. I've been in touch with some of them. I did a survey of what they were doing later when they were no longer students and they were adults, and all of them said that it had had a really strong impact on their lives, where they wanted to live, what kind of work they wanted to do, who they wanted to marry, how they wanted to raise their children, just all kinds of things, how they look at the world.
So some of them continue to travel around in this, nomadic fashion, I guess you could say, even when they aren't following their family around.
Yes. Some of them end up also doing State Department or diplomat or military or other kinds of work, international education. So they end up working in different places. One of the students I know taught in international school after he himself had gone to international school. He was from Indiana, and then he went to
I think we're teaching
Egypt.
in international schools, you can kind of choose your city, can't you, and move around the world a lot?
Yes. He's now in Peru, and he was in New Delhi, and he was in Khartoum, he was in Tokyo. He was in lots of different countries.
Whoa, seriously, around the world.
Yes.
So people don't necessarily tend to be like Middle Eastern nomads or Far Eastern nomads or South American nomads. People are like really all over the world?
The students I know, they seem to have moved around all over the place. I think because when they were growing up, they tended to move all over the place too. There was one student who was born in D.C. and then she lived in Japan, India, Israel, Sweden, Finland, and somewhere else, and then ended up in college in the U.S. again. But she lived in lots of different countries. And then this one student I mentioned, he had lived in Egypt most of his life, although because his parents were teachers in international school. And then he ended up teaching in international school himself after he lived in Brussels and Tokyo and several other places. But then he ended up working in, I think now it's the third different international school. And he said he keeps meeting people, his former teachers from other former international schools that he attended as a kid, or people or some of the kids that he went to school with now are international school teachers or administrators. So he said it's kind of a small world in terms of knowing all these people that end up, in the same places that you are.
So do these people tend to know each other?
More than you would think, actually. Yeah, it's the whole small world, idea. When I did my video in 2001, it was filmed on 6 different campuses, and I had help from 5 different people who were filming on the 4 of the other campuses because they were in like Colorado, California, Ohio, Maryland, and so I knew a lot of these students from their videos because the people would film their panels and then send me all the videos. So I felt like I knew a lot of these students from watching them millions of times, choosing which clip I was going to use for the video, but I hadn't actually met them. And then a few years later, I did a follow-up study. And so I was trying to track down the students from the various schools, and I was using social media to do that. And I found one student who sounded like he was probably the right person, Greg. So I emailed him and said, "Are you the person who went to this school in Ohio?" and so forth. And he was. So I sent him my survey, and he did it right away. And then he said, so I'd love to get a copy of the video. Could I get that from you? And I said, yeah, sure. What's your address? And he was a teacher in India at that time. And so I started writing, and I expected an address in India. And he said, oh, well, you can send it to Lansing, New York. After the street address. And I was like,
right
Lansing, New York? And he was like, yeah, that's where my mom lives. I was like, really? I live like 5 minutes away from there. And he said, oh, really? I'm going to come visit in a month. We should get coffee. So we did, actually. So that was really fun because I'd never met him, actually. I just felt like I knew him because I'd seen him on video for so many hours, watching him to pick clips of what he was going to say. But it turned out his mom now lived in Lansing, although previously they had lived in Egypt, they'd lived in Russia, they'd lived in all kinds of places, but now she lived in Lansing. So I got to meet him, and in fact, I got to videotape him again doing a follow-up interview. So that was really nice because I had, it was about 9 years after he'd been in the video, and I got to see what he was like as an adult. And he was by then teaching in international school in India, but he was visiting his mom. So that was funny. And with that kid, I just had coincidences all over the place that everybody knew him. I kept running